Episode 1. She stole from the dead, and the dead followed. The first letter was folded 6 times. Old, brittle, edges yellow but not with time, with something darker, like the oil of fingers that never wash clean. I didn't mean to open it, but I did. It was buried beneath the altar, inside a black wooden box marked with no crosses, no saints. Only 3 words, carved deep into the lid. Do not read. Which, of course, meant I would. I thought it was research. I told myself it was journalism. But the moment I unfolded that letter, the church grew cold. Not drafty. Cold like judgment. The handwriting was jagged, but careful. My name is Clara G. Monroe, and I stole from the dead. I was 17. I didn't believe in the curse, and I wanted something beautiful to wear when I ran away. So I took the rosary from Mother Enid's coffin. She had been buried with it, mouth sewn shut, cross pressed to her chest like a warning, not a comfort. Asterisk, they told me she was a saint. They lied. My breath caught when I read the next line. The day I put on, the mirror stopped reflecting me. The next day, my sister stopped speaking. And on the 3rd night, my name appeared inside her throat. I stood up, shaking. It wasn't just a letter. It was the air around me, pressing down, as if the walls themselves had read it too, and didn't like what they heard. I stuffed the paper back into the box, but the box was gone. So was the altar, so was the light. The entire sanctuary had shifted. The pews faced the wrong direction. The stained glass was blacked out, and in the center of the room, where no coffin had ever stood before, was a woman, wrapped in burial cloth, mouth sewn shut, eyes open. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. She lifted her hand, and dangling from her fingers was a rosary, not silver, not gold, bone, each bead carved with a tiny name. And the name at the center? Clara. I ran, out of the church, out into the street, but the air didn't change. I was outside, but the inside came with me. And behind me, I heard it, the faint sound of beads tapping bone. Click, 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 like fingers knocking on my spine. Back home, I tried to forget. I showered. I lit candles. I turned on every light. But at 3:33 a.m., the mirror in my hallway cracked. Not shattered, split right down the center. And in the broken glass, I saw her, Clara, but not 17. Older, rotten, wearing the rosary, and behind her, Mother Enid, eyes stitched shut, holding a knife made of letters. The next morning, I went back to the church. The box was there. So was the letter, but it had changed. Now, beneath Clara's name, a line had appeared in handwriting that wasn't hers. You read it. Now you keep it. Now she follows you. I didn't steal from the dead, but I opened their confession. And that, it seems, is enough. Episode 2. He lied in the confessional, and the walls remembered. The second letter was hidden in the wooden panel behind the old confessional. I found it by accident, or maybe it found me. The panel was loose. It shouldn't have been, and wedged inside, folded into quarters, was a single page that smelled of incense and sweat. The ink was faded, but the voice behind it, sharp, regretful, terrifyingly human. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. But I was the father, and I sinned anyway. His name was scratched out, but not before he signed the end of the letter with trembling grace. In Christ's silence I hid. P. He had served at St. Ria's for 22 years, buried 24 children, married hundreds, forgave thousands. But as I read the letter, I understood something. He never meant to confess. He meant to contain. There was one child, he wrote, who came every Friday. She never spoke, just wept, and slid me pieces of paper through the grate. Each one a confession, not hers, but someone else's. Always the same name, always the same sin. And I told her to stop, because the name was mine. When I finished reading, the walls of the confessional creaked, as if the wood remembered being lied to. I looked up. The grate on the other side was open, but no one was there, only a breeze that smelled like old parchment and melted wax. That night, I listened to the recording from my phone. I had captured myself reading the letter aloud for documentation, but as I played it back, my voice was gone, replaced by his. You must understand, I didn't deny it because I felt innocent. I denied it because I knew once it was spoken, the church would collapse under the weight of truth. Confession is a wall with two sides, and on mine I built a false door. I paused the recording. My hand was shaking, and then knocking from the inside of my closet. 3 taps, even, measured, like someone waiting for absolution that never came. I opened the door. There was no one inside, but on the back wall, a slit had formed, thin, vertical, the same shape as a confessional grate. Behind it, darkness. But from that darkness, a whisper bled through. Not a word, a breath, and then my name, spoken in a voice that was not mine. The next morning, I returned to the church. The confessional had changed. The wood was splintered, the walls cracked, and etched into the back panel, just beneath where I found the letter, "You heard my truth. Now sit where I sat and feel what I felt." I did. Just for a second, I stepped inside, closed the door, sat where he once sat, and immediately I heard them, dozens of voices, weeping, whispering, repeating sins that were never forgiven because he had never listened. And now they had found me. I stumbled out, but I was different. The inside of my throat burned, like it had held too many names, too many secrets, and on my tongue, a taste I couldn't place. Salt, ash, and something holy, but twisted, like a prayer that had been repeated too many times, without ever meaning it. Episode 3. She watched him die and left the window open. Some sins don't need knives. They bloom in silence. And sometimes the most violent thing you can do is nothing at all. The third letter was different. It was tucked inside a hymnal. Page 333. As if it knew that number meant something. Meant someone. The edges were torn, but the handwriting was careful, delicate, even, written like a love note to a ghost. His name was Matthew, and I didn't kill him, but I didn't help him live either. It began like a memory. A woman detailing the way her husband coughed in the night, how the sound had changed, soft at first, then sharp, then wet. I knew it was getting worse, but I stopped turning over when he made the sound. I stopped asking if he needed water. I stopped kissing his forehead when he shivered. And the last night, I left the window open. It was cold, and I think I wanted the cold to decide. I stopped reading halfway through because I left my own window open. Not last night, but right now. And the wind that moved through it wasn't just cold. It was purposeful, like it had read ahead of me. I kept going. They called it pneumonia. I called it God's will. But I knew better. I watched. I measured his breathing like rosary beads, counting backward. When he stopped, the curtain lifted. And the wind whispered, "Now he knows." But wasn't Matthew who said that. It was the window. My skin prickled because the room had gone too still. The flame on my desk candle bent inward, toward the window, not away. And outside, the air moved like lungs. Inhale, pause, exhale. But nothing made the trees sway. Nothing moved the grass. Only the space around me changed. I stood, closed the letter, turned to shut the window, but it wouldn't move, not even an inch. The latch wasn't broken. The frame wasn't warped. It simply refused. I stared into glass, saw my reflection, and behind it, a figure, faint, shoulders hunched, mouth open in a silent breath. I turned, no one there, but the breeze passed through me, not around, through, and I heard it, so faint I could have sworn it came from my own ribs. She left me, so now I wait. Someone always leaves a window open. I didn't sleep that night, because every time I closed my eyes, I saw her, the woman from the letter, standing in a kitchen, looking out a window, listening for his last cough, and not praying it would stop. The letter was gone in the morning, but on the window pane, written in condensation, no one else could see. You didn't help either. Now, every night at 3:33, the window creaks, never opens, never shuts. It just breathes. And sometimes I catch the scent of cough syrup and old flowers. Sometimes I feel the pull of the blanket being taken off my shoulders, softly, gently, as if someone wants me cold, wants me to know what it feels like to be left with the window open. Episode 4. He buried her heart in the garden, and it kept beating. The fourth letter was damp, stained at the edges, smelling faintly of soil, and something older, the scent of roots that had fed on grief. I found it pressed beneath a flower pot behind the cathedral's rectory, wrapped in twine, pinned with a rusted nail. It wasn't hidden. It had been planted. Her name was Abigail, and I loved her more than I loved God. So when the sickness came, I made a promise. I told her I wouldn't let them take her whole. I read it under a storm-gray sky, kneeling beside the same soil that had soaked through the page. My fingers dirted, my pulse slower, as if reading each word pulled my own heart deeper into the ground. The doctor said it was fast, that the infection had already touched her spine, that she couldn't feel anything. But she looked at me, and I know she did. And in that look, I heard the question, will I be forgotten? I swore she wouldn't be. So I made her a garden. I stopped reading, because the wind had changed. It wasn't blowing. It was pulsing, a rhythm, subtle, low, like a heartbeat. From beneath my feet, I turned the page. They buried her at St. Grace, but they didn't get all of her. That night, I took what I could still hold. Not her body, not her face. Her heart, still warm, still heavy, and I placed it in the soil behind our house. I fed it her favorite songs. I watered it with rainwater and red wine. And some nights, it spoke back. I closed the letter. The garden behind my rental property had been quiet for weeks, but that night, it bloomed. Vines I hadn't planted curled around the fence. And beneath the rose bush, the soil pulsed again, not moved, beat, and with every throb, I heard her name. Not Abigail, not fully, a broken version of it, whispered by petals. Abby, Abby, Abby. I dug at midnight, not deep, just enough to see. And when I reached the center, I found something wrapped in velvet, soft, warm, still pulsing. A box. Inside, not a heart, but a poem, written in the same hand as the letter. The body dies, the name rots, but love, when buried, feeds. And if you read this, you've watered her too. I ran inside, hands filthy, chest tight. I tried burning the letter, but the flames wouldn't take. The page grew darker, but never vanished. It only bled, right across the words. She knows your name now. I haven't gone back to the garden, but the roses won't stop growing. They bloom red every morning, even in frost, even in shadow. And at night, when the house is still, I hear it, that beat, soft, insistent, hungry, and somewhere beneath the soil, she waits for someone to say, I remember you. Episode 5, he forgot her face, and she took his eyes. The fifth letter didn't arrive in the church. It arrived in my mirror, slid beneath the crack of the bathroom door while I was brushing my teeth. No footsteps, no knock, just a soft whisper of paper on tile. It was folded with care, thin parchment, edges burnt, the ink dark, heavy, like it had been pressed with guilt instead of a pen. And on the front, in trembling script, I can no longer remember her face. So she took my eyes. Her name was Meredith. I painted her 1,000 times, drew her in steam, traced her smile into my pillow each morning. But memory is a cruel god, and time is its priest. The writer never said how she died, Only that after her passing, he began to forget details. First the small things. The mole beneath her lip, the crease between her brows when she laughed too hard, the way her pupils would dilate just before she lied, then the shape of her chin, the angle of her collarbone, and finally, her entire face. It was as if my mind refused to hold her, like it was allergic to the truth of losing her. The moment I read that line, my reflection blinked, but I hadn't. I leaned closer to the glass, and for a split second, the face looking back at me was not mine. The letter continued. So I stared at photos, dozens, hundreds, but they began to blur. Her face would vanish, or worse, become someone else's. Until finally, in the mirror, I saw nothing but 2 black holes. And in the holes, she was smiling. I backed away from my own mirror, but the room stayed the same. Silent, still, expectant, and in the fog glass, 2 indentations appeared, like fingers pressing from the other side. I turned all the mirrors around that night, every one of them, even the tiny one in my phone case. But at 3:33 a.m., I woke to find one turned back toward me. Just one, and in it, I saw her. Not Meredith, but someone. She was faceless, like a memory someone tried too hard to recall and ended up tearing. And yet she knew me. She raised her hand. So did I. We touched the glass at the same time, and I felt warmth, not from the mirror, from within my eyes. They burned for hours, and in the morning, I could no longer recognize the photos on my wall. My friends, my parents, myself, they were all wrong, like someone had rearranged their faces into something almost familiar, but just different enough to unnerve me. I looked for the letter again. It was gone, but etched into the silver of my bathroom mirror, a phrase burned through. If you forget her face, you forget your own. Now, I wear sunglasses inside. Avoid glass. Avoid eyes. But sometimes, in the darkness, I see her face clearly, and that's when I know she's using my sight now, because someone has to remember. Episode 6. She wrote her sins on her skin, and now they don't fade. The 6th letter wasn't folded. It was rolled, tight, precise, and tied with a single strand of black thread that smelled faintly of copper and jasmine. Inside, the ink was smeared in places, not by time, by blood, and across the top margin, one sentence written in all caps. The body always remembers what the mind denies. My name is Iris. I used to believe confession meant release, but all it did was move the weight from my chest to my skin. It began as a ritual. Whenever Iris did something wrong, a lie, a betrayal, a stolen kiss, she'd take a needle and write it on her thigh in ink, not as punishment, as memory. If I can see it, I won't do it again. But over time, the ink wouldn't wash off. And worse, the words she never wrote began to appear on their own. One morning, I woke up and the word envy was wrapped around my ribs. I hadn't spoken it. I hadn't even thought it. But my body knew. I paused reading. My hand brushed inside my arm. It itched, a slow burn, like something spelling itself from beneath the surface. I checked. Nothing yet, but I felt it. A word, waiting. I kept reading. Soon the marking spread. Not only sins I had committed, but ones I hadn't lived yet. Betrayal across my hip. Mother in red across my shoulder blade. You said yes between my fingers, none of which made sense until weeks later. And by then, the skin refused to forgive. That night, I showered. Steam curled around the mirror. The tile hummed. And when I stepped out, there it was, one word, written faintly on my collarbone in pink-red script. Regret. I hadn't done anything. Not yet, but the body remembers in future tense. The way grief sometimes arrives before the moment that causes it. I tried to scrub it off. The word grew darker. I reread Iris's final lines. The marking stopped being ink. they began to pulse, like veins. And some nights, they whisper, not in voices, in heat. They burn just before I dream of doing something wrong. I wake up and the act is written, long before I ever commit it. I fell asleep by candlelight, the letter under my pillow, and dreamed of standing in front of a mirror, writing the word abandon on my chest, with fingers that weren't mine. I woke up screaming, not from fear, from pain. My left hand was raw, as if I'd scratched something into my shoulder in the night. And when I looked, the word was there, forgiveless, a word that doesn't even exist. But it felt right, because I knew it wasn't meant to be read. It was meant to be carried. Now I check my body every morning for new names, new warnings, new sins waiting to happen. Because it's not about whether I've done something wrong. It's about the fact that my skin already knows I will. Episode 7. He pretended to pray, and something answered anyway. Some people pray out of hope, others out of habit. But he prayed with no one listening. At least, that's what he thought. The 7th letter was written on the back of a hymnal page. Not torn, ripped. The top corner still stained with candle wax. The bottom edge scorched, as if the words were trying to flee the paper, but got caught mid-escape. My name was Thomas, and I never believed. But I folded my hands when they told me to. I whispered their words. I nodded, I crossed my chest. Not because I had faith, but because I liked the sound of doubt in holy places. I read the letter sitting on the church steps, the sky heavy with storm. The stained glass behind me breathing like lungs made of color. The first time I felt it, I thought I was imagining it. I had just whispered a line I'd said 100 times. Deliver us from evil. But this time, something chuckled. Not loud, not cruel, just near. I stopped reading, because just then, I heard it too. Not laughter, but something close. A shift in air. Like breath pressed against a neck. I continued. The voice didn't speak in language. It pressed on my ribs. It hummed in my teeth. And it never answered what I asked for. It answered what I deserved. Thomas prayed for healing. His brother died. He prayed for peace. His wife left in silence. He prayed for sleep. The nightmares came. And each time he knelt again, not to God, but to the pattern. Because something, somewhere, was listening, and it liked the sound of a skeptic breaking. It began to reward me, he wrote, not with blessings, with reminders. Flies in my cereal, dogs barking at my shadow, mirrors that fog when I hadn't showered. It wanted me to know that I was heard. That night, I returned home and lit a candle, out of superstition, not devotion, and before I could speak, the flame bowed, once, like it had been greeted. Asterisk, the last time I prayed, Thomas wrote, I didn't even use words. I just thought it. I wish I'd never started. Asterisk, and I swear I heard something lean in close, closer than skin, and whisper, too late. I haven't prayed in years. But that night, I whispered something in my head, just to see, not a request, just a question. Is someone listening? And across the room, the candle flickered sideways, against the wind. Now, when I walk into churches, the candles are already lit, even when no one's been there, and the prayers left in the pews, they echo too long, as if they're being held, like breath behind teeth. I burned the letter, but the scorch marks on the floor stayed. And that night, my sleep was filled with a sound I'd never heard before. Knees creaking on old wood, over and over, like something is still kneeling, long after the amen. Episode 8. She hid the baby in the baptismal font, and the water never went still again. Some sins are hidden behind doors, some beneath floorboards. But hers floated. The 8th letter was found inside the baptismal font at St. Rhea's. Soaked, but not ruined. The ink hadn't bled. It had settled, as if the paper knew where it belonged. In water, there was no envelope, only a single page, folded like a cradle, wrapped in a strand of white lace, and across the top, in barely their script, he never cried, but the water did. I was 17, and I didn't know what I was doing. He was born in silence, just before dawn. No scream, no gasp, just eyes open, as if he'd already seen too much. I named him Caleb, only in my mind, because no one else was allowed to know. He lived for 27 minutes, and I held him like he might come back if I believed hard enough, but the breath never stayed. And I didn't know where to take him. I paused reading, because outside the window, the wind changed. It didn't blow. It circled, like a whisper too afraid to move forward. And in the holy font beside me, the water rippled, even though the air was still. I couldn't bury him. They would have asked questions, and I couldn't leave him in my room. So I wrapped him in linen, kissed his forehead, and brought him here, to the font, to the place meant to clean sin away. I thought maybe if he touched the water, he'd still go somewhere holy. I closed my eyes because I felt it, not the baby, not the mother, the longing, the kind that stretches between realms, between memory and regret. I set him in the water, just for a moment, long enough to hope, long enough to beg. And when I lifted him out, he felt lighter. So I let go, and he sank. The baptismal font had no bottom that day, not in her words, not in the feeling it left behind, only weightlessness, only water that held grief like it had been waiting for it. I looked into the font. The surface was still, but then a bubble, just one, rising, popping, and then again, another, and another, like a lullaby sung from underneath. I backed away. The air was wet behind my ears, the kind of wet that doesn't drip, just clings. I kept reading. They emptied the font days later, but the water kept returning. No matter how many times they drained it, each morning it was full again, and colder. They said it was a pipe issue. But I knew Caleb was still there. He never had a birth certificate, never had a grave, but the water remembers. Every time someone was baptized after that, the font would ripple, just once, like something moving beneath the surface, not angry, not sad, just waiting to be named again. I burned the letter, but the smoke didn't rise. It curled, dropped, sank to the floor like steam over still water. And that night, when I closed my eyes, I dreamed of a hand beneath the water, small, blue, open, waiting for mine. I haven't touched holy water since, because the next time I dip my fingers in, I don't know whose name I'll be whispering, but I know something will whisper mine back. Episode 9. He laughed at the possessed girl and took her screams home. The 9th letter was written on the inside of a torn Bible cover. No greeting, no explanation, just one sentence burned into the leather with something not quite fire. I should have never laughed. Her name was Lydia. She was 14, and she screamed like something was being skinned inside her mouth. I didn't believe in possession, didn't believe in anything. So I laughed. The writer never signed his name, only initials, TG. He claimed to be an EMT, first on the scene when Lydia was brought into the church tied in a blanket, eyes rolled back, mouth whispering languages that bit the air when they passed. He said her voice didn't match her lungs, that it came from the side of her neck, not the throat. I watched the priest pour holy water on her chest, watched her laugh, then scream, then laugh again. And when she opened her mouth wide enough to tear, I leaned to the guy next to me and said, "She's auditioning for hell." He didn't laugh, but something else did. I read the letter while the wind clawed at my window, a low, uneven rhythm, like something breathing wrong just outside the glass. And from my closet, a creak, one slow drag of wood on wood, as if the door had shifted without moving. She died that night, not from exorcism, from exhaustion. Her body gave out, but her voice didn't. It clung to the ceiling for 12 seconds after she stopped breathing. Then it fell and hit me square in the chest. I haven't laughed since. I paused, looked to my closet, still closed, but the air near it vibrated like someone humming through clenched teeth. That night I went home, turned on the TV, poured a drink. At 3:33 a.m., the sound system came on by itself. Full volume. Not music, not white noise. Her screaming. Raw, wet, too loud to be sound, too broken to be silence. I unplugged everything. Still she screamed. I threw the speakers out. Still she screamed. Moved apartments. Changed my name. Still she screamed. That night in my room, I heard her too. Not loud. Worse. Faint. Somewhere in the walls. Behind the insulation. Like a sound trying to forget how to be human. And still angry that it can't. I tried to tell a priest. The letter said. He told me screams aren't demons. They're echoes. But what if echoes find new mouths? What if I opened mine to laugh and gave her a door? My closet opened at 3:33. Not all the way. Just enough for air to slip out. Hot, metallic, and inside the crack. Darkness shifted, like lungs inflating. I sleep with headphones now. The letter ended. White noise, ocean waves, static. But sometimes, in between tracks, I hear her, and she's not screaming anymore. She's laughing. Now, I don't laugh at anything, because the last time someone did, the scream found a home, and it's still there, scratching at the closet, waiting for the next open mouth. Episode 10, she swallowed her secrets, and they started breathing inside her. Some secrets are meant to be confessed, others to be buried, but hers, she tried to consume them, and they lived anyway. The 10th letter was not on paper. It was burned into fabric, a strip of linen, stiff, dark with age, wrapped around a bottle, sealed in wax. Inside the bottle, air, nothing more. But when I opened it, it sighed, as if something trapped inside had waited a very long time to be remembered. The linen strip carried only 5 lines of text, faint, stitched in red thread. I wrote my sins. I tore the pages. I chewed them slow. I let them inside. They never left. No name, no signature, but beneath the stitching, a note scratched into the bottle's glass. Check your breath. I held my palm to my mouth, exhaled, and for a split second, it didn't feel like my breath. It felt heavier, thicker, occupied. They told me to speak. The linen note continued, to unburden. But I was tired of being heard. So I started to write, small slips, one for every shame. Then I burned the first, and it came back in my dreams. So I tried something else. She chewed the second, let the ink bleed onto her tongue, let the truth melt with saliva and silence. Swallowed it whole. The guilt tasted like rust. But for a moment, I was clean, so she kept going. Dozens of confessions, names, crimes, whispers she'd never dared say aloud, all folded, chewed, swallowed, like communion. But no redemption came. The dreams got louder. The air inside me moved when I wasn't breathing. And one night, I heard a hiccup from somewhere beneath my ribs. Not mine. I stopped reading, because I felt it. A flutter beneath my sternum, a movement I couldn't name. And in the mirror, my chest rose before I inhaled. She wrote that the whispers began a week later, coming from within, not her thoughts. Different cadence, different guilt. Voices forming in the space between lungs and heart. They don't ask to be let out. They like it in here. It's warm, and I fed them. I placed the linen back in the bottle, sealed it, but the sighs still echoed, soft, wet, like a breath that didn't belong. That night, I slept face down, woke up choking, and when I sat up, there was a message fogged on the inside of my window. Tell me or I will. Now I cough and I lie. gasp when I try to stay silent. And when I sleep, I dream of writing things down, tearing the page, and reaching for my throat, because some secrets don't want to be buried. They want to be housed. And if you feed them long enough, they'll start to breathe. And worse, they'll start to speak. Episode 11, he broke the cross in anger, and something started crawling down from it. Some break bread. He broke wood. And from that fracture, something woke. The 11th letter wasn't delivered. It was left, taped at the foot of the altar with 2 nails. Bloody, bent, written in block capitals, like the writer didn't trust himself with curves. I didn't mean to break it, but I wanted God to feel something. He had gone to church alone that night. No priest, no congregation, just rage wrapped in silence, and a crucifix too large to ignore. I screamed at it, begged, cursed, whispered things no gospel would survive. And when nothing answered, I reached the base and pulled. The cross cracked at the top, not at the arms, at the crown, where the face was. It didn't fall. It bent, like it was bowing. And something dripped. The blood didn't surprise him. He thought he'd cut himself, until it kept going. And the stain wasn't red. It was black, black and slow and warm, like oil that had been waiting in a bone. I stepped back, but it reached. First the hand, then the arm. It wasn't the Christ I'd broken. It was something inside him. I stopped reading, because I'd seen that cross, hung crooked above the North Chapel, cracked, but never replaced. And I'd always thought it was old, not wounded. The letter continued. It crawled down face first. Not like a man, like something born in walls. Joints wrong, limbs bending where skin should have refused. Its face was mine, but not angry, disappointed. He ran, of course. Who wouldn't? But when he got home, the crucifix he wore around his neck since childhood snapped in 2, not at the chain, at the chest. Since then, I can't stand near wood. It hums when I'm close. Old wood, church wood, it remembers. He stopped praying, not from loss of faith, from fear, because silence no longer meant absence. It meant listening. And every time he tried to whisper to God, the reply came first, from something that spoke beneath language. I broke the cross. But it wasn't forgiveness I let loose. It was a thing we nailed to silence. And now it walks. That night, I visited the church, alone, and at 3:33 a.m., the broken cross shifted. Not a lot, just enough to creak. And from the rafters above it, something dropped, not onto the floor, into me, a weight in the chest, a voice behind the lungs, a name I didn't recognize, but somehow already answered to. Now I don't look at crucifixes, because they look back, and somewhere behind the nailed hands, the real punishment is crawling downward, still wearing the face of the man. Who thought rage could wake a silent God? Episode 12. She never spoke about her husband's disappearance, but he started whispering from the walls. The 12th letter didn't look like a confession. It looked like a warning someone didn't want to write. Typed, not handwritten, but the keys struck unevenly, like each one had been pressed with a trembling hand, or by a machine that remembered grief. No greeting, no sign-off, just a title across the top. His voice never left. Only the body did. We don't talk about what happened to Philip. Not in this house. Not because we can't. Because we're afraid he might hear it and finish the story. She was married for 19 years. The kind of marriage that hums instead of sings. No romance novels. No bruises. Just routine coffee, quiet dinners, and one day, nothing. He vanished on a Wednesday. Went to fix a leak in the basement. Never came back upstairs. There was no scream, no sound, just an absence that made the air too thick to breathe. They found nothing in the basement, no tools disturbed, no door ajar, only a faint patch of condensation on the far wall, shaped like a hand, pressed there, held there, begging or warning, no one could say. She never spoke of him again. No police, no obituary, no memorial. If you name the ghost, it sharpens its teeth. But 3 months later, the whispering started. Not at night. At 3:33 p.m. Same time he used to come home from work. Same time she used to pour his tea. At first, it was faint. A low rasp behind the pantry. Then, under the floorboards, behind the bathroom mirror, inside the stove vent. And always the same phrase. You never said goodbye. I started answering out loud. Just once. Just to say, I'm sorry. And the next day, the walls began to breathe. She described how the paint blistered near his favorite chair, how mold shaped itself into his initials above the headboard, how the ceiling above the dinner table cracked in a perfect half moon, like a mouth about to speak. I stopped using the oven. The flame speaks in vowels now. I sleep in the guest room. He doesn't whisper there. Yet. I read the letter in a room with no windows, but the walls felt thinner with every line, like they were listening, not from curiosity, but recognition. You can't bury someone in silence, she wrote. They'll dig upward, through sheetrock, through memory, through guilt. And when they arrive, they won't knock. That night, I stayed awake. No wind, no pipes, no voices, until 3:33 a.m. And then, one word, from inside the plaster. Not screamed, not spoken, breathed. My name. I haven't read aloud since. Because now I know, some absences don't echo. They settle, they wait, and when they get hungry enough, they speak. Episode 13. He tried to burn the confession book, and it started writing back. Some books close. Some books rot. This one, it waits for heat, so it can bleed. The 13th letter came from someone who never signed their name, but their fingerprints were still on the page. Not ink, not soot, blood, streaked like something had tried to stop the paper from leaving. But the letter wanted to be read. I found the book in a church no one remembered building. It was on the pulpit, already open, already whispering. At first I thought it was scripture. Then I saw my name on the page. He hadn't written it, not by hand, but the page knew what he had done. Not the crime, the want, the thing he hadn't done, but would. Eventually, I closed the book. It hummed. I left it. It followed. I locked it in a drawer. It bled through the wood. Eventually, he did what most would do. I tried to burn it. He waited until 3:33 a.m. because if it was cursed, that would be the hour. He brought matches, a bowl of salt, a prayer he only half believed, and the book, bound in something that looked like leather, but breathed like skin. The fire caught, but the pages didn't curl. They opened, and they began to write. Not ink, not ash, red, wet, moving. The letters formed slowly, shaking like veins. It wrote my name again, then a date, next week. Then it wrote the word, yield. I dropped the match. It hissed. The flame died, but the book started breathing. I paused reading, because in my hands, the page began to warm. Only a little, but enough to feel like a pulse. I took a knife, cut the spine. The book screamed. Not aloud, in the walls, in my teeth. It screamed in my own voice. He tried drowning it. It bubbled. He tried burying it. The dirt turned black. He tried forgetting it. But every dream was a page being turned. Now it writes while I sleep, on my walls, on my mirrors, on my arms. Words I've never said, names I don't know, dates that haven't come yet. But each one in the same way. Chapter 13, his blood was the ink. I tried putting the letter down, but the air in the room felt heavier, like the book was watching me, from somewhere behind the paper, from somewhere under the floor, waiting. That night I heard writing, not pen, not pencil, a wet dragging sound, like bone across skin. In the morning, on the wall beside my bed, you opened us. Now finish us. Now I sleep with gloves, with salt rings, with nothing sharp in the room. But still, every night at 3:33, I wake to find a new word, etched in the dark behind my eyes. And I know the book still writes, and I am almost out of pages. Episode 14. She tried to repent, but something else answered first. Some people kneel to let go. She knelt to be heard. But not every altar listens with grace, and not every silence belongs to God. The 14th letter was written in 2 inks. The first, black, steady, like a woman trying to be precise with her guilt. The second, red, shaky, as if someone else had taken the pen halfway through and kept writing. His blood was on the floorboards. My tears were on the carpet, and I thought maybe if I cried hard enough, the stain would lift from both. It didn't. She never names the man, but she calls him the one I love wrong. The kind of wrong that leaves bruises, some on skin, most on memory. I didn't kill him, but I didn't stop what came for him. And now, the house holds its breath every time I say his name. So I stopped speaking. She went to the chapel 3 weeks after he died, at midnight, alone, barefoot as penance. The confessional was locked, so she knelt before the altar and whispered, "Forgive me." Nothing, not a creak, not a flicker, until the floor beneath her knees warmed, just slightly, like something alive was stirring underneath. I whispered again, "Forgive me." And then the statue of Christ above the altar tilted its head, only an inch, but toward me, as if listening or smelling. She froze, but something in her chest kept speaking, not aloud, not with words, with need, and something answered, not in words, in a smile. The statue's mouth curled, barely, but she saw teeth, too many, too sharp, and from behind the altar, a voice not meant for stone, unfolded. Why ask forgiveness when you already know the cost? She ran, of course, but not fast enough, because behind her, echoing off the stained glass, you don't need to be clean, just willing. The next morning, she found a mark on her shoulder, not a bruise, a signature, signed in something deep beneath the skin. And when she looked in the mirror, her eyes were not her own. I prayed again, desperate this time. But every time I said, "God," something else answered. Not with punishment, with promises. Soft ones, honeyed, rotting. I stopped reading, because I could smell it. Not decay, something sweeter. Overripe, fermenting. Wrong. The last line of the letter was written in red. He died with my name in his mouth. Now something else wears it. And every time I kneel, I feel its hands on my spine. That night, I tried to pray. Just once. A single whisper. But I never finished a word, because I heard it too. A laugh. Soft. Almost tender. And from the corner of my room, a hand resting gently on the wall. 5 fingers. No shadow. Waiting for me to finish what she started. Episode 15. The last confession wasn't written by a human. Most confessions begin with guilt. The final one began with curiosity. And that was the most dangerous sin of all. I found the last page when I wasn't looking. It wasn't folded. It wasn't hidden. It was already waiting, in the center of the room, on the floor, beneath the pulpit. Perfectly flat. Perfectly still. No signature. No title. But written in ink that shimmered as if it remembered fire. The words didn't look like any human hand had shaped them. They weren't written. They were breathed onto the page. Alive. Organic. Tense. And the first line read, "You have finished reading the confessions of others. Now read the one that remembers all of them." I knew it before I accepted it. The book had never been a book. Not really. It was a womb. A mouth. A graveyard of sins that refused to stay dead. I was born from the first word of regret. When Cain looked down at Abel's blood and wondered if it made him holy, I was written in the margins of silence. I am not your pen. I am your echo. I tried to turn the page. There was none. I tried to burn it. The flame stopped just short, as if the fire remembered being born from this. You think confessions are for cleansing. They are for collecting. And I have collected everything. The ink moved as I read, new sentences forming beneath my breath, finishing my thoughts, answering things I hadn't dared ask aloud. You wonder if you're forgiven. There is no such thing. There is only memory. And I remember you. The lights dimmed, not turned off, just sank into something softer, something watching. And I realized it wasn't showing me the final confession. It was writing it. With me. My hands trembled, but I didn't drop the page, because now it had weight, heat, breath. You turned every page. You listened. You judged. You feared. And now you are the book. Your body, the binding. Your lungs, the parchment. Your heartbeat, the quill. I fell, not to my knees, but into myself. And in that darkness, I felt every word I had ever swallowed, writing itself across my bones. The paper vanished, but the words remained, inside me, like static in the soul, like fire just waiting for ink. And I heard it, for the first and last time, the book's voice, not in my ears, in my spine, whispering. No one escapes being written. Only those who stop pretending they're the writer become more than the story. I looked in the mirror that night. My reflection blinked first, and across the glass, in letters I didn't carve. Confess. Not as a command, as a seed, growing. The book is gone. But I wake every night at 3:33, with words in my mouth. Some mine, some not, but all of them waiting for someone to read the next page.